Hello gang, give me just a minute here to finish rescuing a couple brushes. I find that many times at the very beginning of a painting session is when I'll go over to my jar, over to my left over here a few feet, where I almost always have a brush or two or 5 or 10 soaking in a brush restorer cleaner. Let's see if I have a bottle of it here that I can show you. Yeah, here we go. There are many things. In fact, Uncle 60 and I have been dialoguing back and forth quite a bit about different cleaners. Here's one of the, I would say, standard or standbys, high-tech, modern, made by Winsor Newton, brush cleaner and restorer for dried acrylic and oil paints. It comes in larger bottles than that, of course, and I usually have a large one, but that'll do. And well, I'll point you where I'm going. So over here, a little bit to my left, is my sort of decorative secondary art stand and bookcase and all kinds of other stuff. So I have a jar like this, kind of a decorative jar, and I'll put some of this brush cleaner restorer into it, just half an inch or so, not very much. There's already some in there, so I just added a little bit. Yet you don't want this stuff going up onto the handle of your brush. It'll take the paint completely off. It'll take it off anyway. But anyway, this is a slow working, like overnight, but in my case, as you heard, if I find a stiff brush anywhere here, let me find one. It happened, I mean, there's a good stiff brush, so I'll put that in there. I don't mean good, I mean bad stiff brush. I don't know about you, maybe some of you are just so careful and particular that this never happens to you, but I'm an artist in a hurry. I'm making a living at this stuff. I don't have time to, anyway, I'm being kind of facetious. Okay, I'm finding lots of bad brushes over here. And I probably won't check on these. I'll forget all about them. I'll put them over there on the shelf. And I won't even think about them for a week, maybe 2. Oh boy, and I'm just doing my long ones right now. Anyway, so they will stay like that, soaking in the bottom of that jar for a couple days or a couple weeks. I'll put them over here. They look kind of artsy. They look okay in my studio. And then usually what happens is I'll come across another one in the next little while and go, oh, I need to go soak this one. And then when I do that, I'll say, oh my goodness, I've got 7 brushes already in there. Then I'll take those out, take them to the kitchen sink, wash them with warm, not hot, warm water. And very often, one of my favorite is goop. Now what, again, Uncle 60 and I've been dialoguing back and forth, and he's given me a recipe for a bunch of soaps that he's already provided me with, and I can't wait to give that a try. In the meantime, if you ever have, here's what I want to say to any beginners that are watching or will ever watch this. When you come upon one of your brushes that has dried paint in it, don't despair too much. Just despair a little bit. Sad to say, that brush will never be quite exactly what it was when you brought it home from the store. That's the bad news. The good news is you can get it pretty darn close. You can turn it into a very usable brush. And if you're really in a hurry to revive a brush, like it's your only one, then this stuff, hand cleaner, goop hand cleaner from Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware. It's not an art product, it's a hardware product. And you just work it and work it and work it. I think I probably worked on some time in the past when I was just in that, I needed this brush. I don't know why, but I only have 300 more, but by the way, this is about 1/4 of my, maybe 1/5 of my total art, my total brush collection. It's only because I don't throw them out. Very rarely. And after painting for 25 years, full-time oil painting, you get a lot of brushes. More than that, I have separate kits. That's really more important. You know, my wedding painter kit, complete, all its brushes. My Alkyd plein air painting kit, already, my watercolor kit, my gigantic easels, 2 of them. I don't take brushes from here to there and back and forth. I try to keep them all complete. Anyway, so this brush was stiff a while ago, and it was in that just overnight. I put it in there yesterday. Took it to the kitchen sink, worked it out with goop, and then the ferrule was loose, which brings me to a very important point. Now I know I'm those of you who are classic messies, there's not much I can do about you. You're going to ruin brushes no matter what I say. All right, but those of you who are moderately, only moderately messy, there's hope for you, you and me. What kills, if you're a beginner, what kills brushes faster than anything else is acrylic brushes, leaving them sitting in your water, even for 5 minutes. Do you follow me? Death to a brush, because the water swells the wood stretches the metal ferrule, and then it starts wiggling. That's exactly what this was. And then when that happens, you have to take a pair of pliers, and not too hard, but give them a good little pinch, like right, not too hard. Gotcha? You with me? By the way, I have a function going on my camera that I don't like here, but that's right, I can't fix it. And so the bristles are nice and bendable, and the ferrule is, this was not, by the way, not one of my favorite brushes. This is not a silver Grand Prix brush. This is a Winsor Newton. It's not quite as expensive, not quite as fancy, but still decent. And I know I did this the other day, but I'll show you again anyway. Many times a brush like this needs a haircut, so I'm cutting with a Snap-on blade way down at right at the ferrule. Okay, don't cut them off up here. Cut them off right from the very bottom, and you'll get many of those runaway bristles that have been bent and are never going to go back in shape. So then, of course, you have a smaller brush than what you had originally. But all things being said, that's a pretty darn good brush. Okay. It's not perfect. It's not going to come to a razor point, but it'll come to a pretty good point. All right, there you go. Free of charge, a little tiny bit of paintbrush care. All right, let's talk about painting now, shall we? And hello, Uncle. Hello, Foxo. Oh, you are working from home. Good. Excellent. Hello, Michael. Good to see you guys. Hello, Tiago. Only 4 minutes late. Yeah, 10 minutes per minute late fee. Hello, Trish. Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a long time. What favorite hog hair brush brand? Yeah, well, that's what these are, Uncle. These Silver Grand Prix. You probably can't read that, can you? Can you read that? Silver Grand Prix. Definitely my favorite brush. I'm not an expert by any means, and I'm really not, as you may have heard, I'm not a snob about art tools. With one exception. If you've heard my rant about artist signatures, okay, I'm a card-carrying art snob. For your signature, you need to buy Winsor Newton Series 7 watercolor brush, red sable brush, best brush ever made in the entire history of humanity. Again, Winsor Newton Series 7, designed, they say, for Queen Victoria. And if you don't believe they're the best brush, just when I'm done with my broadcast, Google, do a search in YouTube for Winsor Newton Series 7. There's a 25-30 minute documentary about how these brushes are made, and honestly, after I watched the documentary, I was astounded that they could sell them as cheaply as they do. Man. All right, let's talk about painting, shall we? Hope somebody wanted to hear that. So here we have, and I forgot to do my clapper. Forgot to write it out. This is number 12. More. There we go. And the date is 2/16. There you go. All legal now. Woohoo! And I'm at a point now, I'm not at a point where I'm going to start doing any tricky things to try to capture likeness. I'm just going to go from what I can see. For those of you who weren't with me a couple days ago, I started out by, there's a real discrete red line on this print. The print was made the same size as the painting. And then with pencil, with one of these black pencils that I use a lot, all my long ones are out with my other easels. I have all my short ones here. Jumbo Jet Black, hang on, distributed by Jerry's Artorama. Okay. So with these and a T-square, I very carefully drew the same lines and then measured using a divider, or if I'm more fussy, a compass, and so on. So that's all been done. My lines are still visible here and here. So if I get worried that some part of this is not accurate, I will remeasure. But my main task today is to refine form and color. Okay, so everything I did yesterday was kind of a sloppy shot in the dark. Sloppy on purpose. I'm not apologizing for winging it. In fact, I guess you guys are as close as we can get. Yesterday when I was painting, I did quite a bit with my left hand. I'll do less of that today. Today's a little bit more fussy. And I explained that with both hands, I'm trying to paint here in a painterly manner, or more precisely, my favorite term is I want my brush strokes to have energy, a fair amount of energy. And I'm actually quite happy with how these look. That is a reasonable amount of energy on the canvas and reasonable lightness. Jim, father of Sara, yeah, reasonable. Okay, so let's get going. I haven't mixed up any colors other than my paint palette left over from yesterday. It's been in the freezer, by the way. I don't know if you should know that trick. It was in the freezer overnight, so that it certainly didn't dry out very much. Okay, now I'm going to have to try to move you guys so I'm not continually standing right in your way today. And sorry that puts you at quite an oblique angle, but it's the best we can do. Hello, Trish. I'm trying to decide where to start. And some of today I'll be making a fashion statement by wearing my 2 pairs of glasses at the same time. I said yesterday that's one of the benefits of not having any adult children in the house anymore. They can't laugh at me because they're not here. All right. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. And I am sad to say, I'm going to start right out with a Winsor Newton Series 7. I explained yesterday that I try to forestall, that's a good word, isn't it? I try to push off as long as possible the using of a red sable brush, because once you start into the sable brushes, you are into tongue painting, serious detail, and the danger there is that you just lose all the energy I just talked about. On the other hand, there's always another hand, right? On the other hand, I've got to execute these faces. They've got to be perfect. They've got to look just like them. And that just cannot be done without doing some really small brush stuff. So here we go. Am I going to be in your way still? I'm afraid I am. I'm so sorry. So even more oblique angle. Here we go. I do like it if you can see both the photo reference and the painting. All right, so let's look at her eye. And again, those of you who are regulars, this is the kind of painting that I normally cuss at. Not literally, but this is, in my opinion, this is not the best kind of painting in the world. Now, let me give you a little bit of my life experience. Just last night, here in the Raleigh area, North Carolina, was our monthly painters forum. This is a group that I started about 16 years ago, and we've been meeting nonstop for 16 years. Took a little break during COVID craziness, but we're back now. And I think there were about a dozen of us last night. Not a big group, fun group, delightful. We're like old friends now. Different people come and go over the years, of course, but most of the core has stayed consistent. And if you don't, I've said this before, I'll say it again, if you don't have such a group team of comrades, friends, who are serious artists, and if you're wanting to be a serious artist, you need to start one. You need to start a group. Just get friends together and say, hey, let's just meet, whatever, once a month maybe. And I am going to measure it here real quick and share what we're working on. That's all we do. Now, I've heard a couple times when I've talked about this, I'm measuring from the guideline here to the edge of her glasses. I don't think that's a measurement I ever made. So, oh yeah, well, the line that was there was accurate anyway, so I can go with it. I've talked to people. By the way, forgive me, I'm interrupting myself. Let me interrupt to talk about painting glasses. I find painting glasses surprisingly irritating. I mean, they're the only, like technically, mathematically, architecturally thing, that's a shape. That shape of the glasses could be plotted on a mathematical formula, right? That's what I'm saying. Somebody designed those glasses, and it's not a random shape. It's very carefully designed. Anyway, so on the one hand, it ought to be easy peasy to replicate those glasses. I find it surprisingly not so. I find it surprisingly a pain in the neck. All right, now what was I talking about? Oh yeah, painters forum, painters group. And I've told people several times over the years, hey, you should start one of these. And the word has come back a couple of times at least that somebody will say, yeah, well, we tried that in our town and it just didn't work. And I was kind of like, what? Okay, so I've thought about what my friend said. By the way, most of the rim around her glasses eventually is going to be white, not black. I just did the black part. So I'm taking one of my tools, which, by the way, can you see this? Yes, of course you can. So this is a Zero Silver Grand Prix brush. Whoops, that died a natural death. And so I just stuck both ends in my pencil sharpener And I have several of these, big ones and little ones, but this one I've used quite a bit. It's been around for quite a while. Seen a lot of use. So even the wooden handle can be used after the brush is no longer any good. And I'm just scratching into that black line, cutting down the heaviness of it. Even with a Winsor Newton Series 7, I couldn't get a fine enough line. All right, but I feel comfortable now that my glasses, well, let me triple check. I just say that and then I go, well, wait a minute. I feel comfortable that my glasses are in the right place. Then all of a sudden I go, wait, maybe they're not. I'm not sure about this. Bottom right corner. So I'm measuring. No, okay. It says it's on. I'll leave it. All right. So some of my friends have said, well, we tried that and it didn't work. And usually what comes back to me is something like somebody in the group took it upon themselves to be a know-it-all, to be the leader and push their weight around. At least, I'm not sure that's true, I wasn't there, but evidently that has happened. Now that has never happened in our group, and I'm not sure why, although after I was told that, I went, let me back up. If you came to our painters group on a Tuesday night, second Tuesday night of every month, if you showed up and just sat through the evening, you probably wouldn't be able to tell who's in charge, so to speak. The only thing that I do is I stand up at the beginning and say, welcome, good to have you here. All right, who wants to go first? Pretty hard, huh? Pretty strong leadership. And then when that person finishes, I say, all right, who wants to go next? So that's pretty much the extent of my leadership. You catching the drift here? Okay, hang on, just let me think for a minute. Yeah, I guess I'll do a little bit more. Anyway, so I certainly don't throw my weight around. I'm certainly not a know-it-all. Okay, but here's what really got me started talking about this just a little while ago, because I was talking about, I was being a little bit of a snob and talking about good painting and not necessarily quite so good painting. And then I thought, well, last night at our Painters Forum, doggone, there was some pretty spectacular, as there always is in the last couple of years, there are some pretty spectacular hyper-realistic or super-realistic or photorealistic, whatever word you want to use, realistic painting. And I love it, because these guys or girls kind of keep me honest, and here's the honest truth, that realism, super realism, accurate realism, whatever you want to call it, type painting is always impressive. Everybody's impressed by that, by the way, except, great big, everybody loves realistic painting except people with an art education, art professors, people with an MFA, and that's only because they have lost their essential humanity, had it beat out of them by the elitist attitude of the academy. Ha, boys, that's a mouthful, and I'm not gonna go back and chase it all down. It's just take it for what it's worth. It's my opinion. I'm right, of course, but it's just my opinion. And they do not like realism. Okay, but all other normal human beings who have not been so damaged. And it actually took me a long time to admit this or recognize this, because I have quite a bit of, the academy in my background, formally trained. It was mostly a waste of time, money, and energy, but nevertheless, I know the culture, and that's how come I know. So anyway, I don't want to be negative, but I'm being positive. Ordinary human beings love realism. There's something about any subject very accurately rendered. I'll put it this way: it tickles us. There's some part of us, all human beings, normal human beings, except for MFA people and professors, who go, golly, that's amazing. All right, so let's just start there and admit that that's the truth, and then let the professors duke it out as they wish. By the way, I'm happy to say I am getting, I think, quite a bit more of a likeness here on Sara by adding these details. Not perfect, but closer than it was. So the next day, the next thing I'm going to do, which will be tomorrow probably. Then, by the way, I'm Jim and friends. I am off to Florida this weekend with my wife to paint a wedding near Palm Beach. So big driving trip. We're going to drive instead of fly. And so I'll be gone for a long time. So I won't get back to this till next Wednesday at least. So a week from today will be my next opportunity. So I want to get as much done today as I can, even though most of my day today will be spent, as it has been for the last 5 months, on this big church mural that I'm doing. All right, what was I going to say? Realism. Let's go back to philosophical for a minute. So all people like realism. That goes counter to the prevailing narrative in the academy, in the art establishment. But I'm old enough and grumpy enough and realistic enough to go, you know what? That's true. People like realism. So the question is, well, then why? And I'm going to do realism here, as you know, but everything else would be impressionistic. It's my style. It works. Pay my bills. I like it. It gives me a chance to show off, and yet to paint what I call ideal painting, which is, I don't call it impressionistic. I call it abstract realism. So I'll define that really quickly. And most of you, if you're a regular, you've heard this rant a dozen times. Abstract realism. I didn't make that up. David LaFell did. Look him up, big dog painter. And when I heard it years ago, I said, bingo, that's a perfect description. What that means is my paintings are definitely realistic, right? There's no question about what they are. But the abstract elements are paramount over the representational elements. That is to say, line, shape, color, design, value, texture. one finger not enough. Line, shape, color, design, value, texture are paramount, are more important than the picture. And I always mispronounce the word on purpose. The picture, which is here, lovely bride and groom. Now, on their faces, that's completely reversed. Here, rendering accuracy is paramount over elements of design. But I still want to infuse some energy, brush energy and so forth into those faces, but it'll be minimal. The rest of the painting will be, yes, these will look like boats, especially from a distance of 6, 8, 10 feet. But when you get up close, they're going to see that they're just pure abstract smudges with mass, with straight line, not mass, straight lines, above them, palette knife stuff. And I'm not going to take time right now to explain why, other than this, why is that the best kind of painting, in my opinion, even though I already said everybody loves realism. By the way, let me just tilt you over here a little bit. Just for fun, I often do super realism. So there's just a one. It's a watercolor painting of a house in Little Washington, North Carolina, where I was in a gallery for many years. And as you can see, it's never sold, but I sure had a heck of a good time doing it. It's fun to me. The best painting, in my opinion, where human beings get the most enjoyment is when the painting is energetic enough, I almost said loose enough, but loose enough will do, so that the viewer's mind has to connect the dots and turn it into the picture. So the viewer's mind will turn these into boats, flowers, grass, sand, dock, pylons, ocean, trees, sky. The viewer's mind will turn it all into that. But when they look at it very carefully, they go, oh, isn't that funny? I could tell that those were boats, even though when looking at them up close, they're just smudges of paint. So it's a very delicate balance. Anyway, that's what I think. Nevertheless, my good friends, like that I was with last night, are always, their ghost is always behind me saying, is that so, Smarty Pants? All right, let's go back to doing a little bit of painting. I'm going to measure, again, I'm not sure I ever, she's got an earring here. That would be a perfect place to measure, to get accurate. If I can get her earring in the right place, then it'll be easier. I think it's right there. Let's check the vertical measurement now. It'll be easier to get the rest of her ear in the right place. Got it? Okay, a little bit too high. There we go. And now that I did that, I have to erase part of my earlier mark. All right, the earring is accurate. That helps a lot. If you watched me do this painting, start this painting a couple weeks ago, no, a couple days, last week, whenever it was, forgive me. Was it month? No, it was last week. You know that I typically start out painting by the seat of my pants, not doing any kind of measuring, no photomechanical tips or tricks, just painting. And as I've said so often, one of the reasons I do that is so that my drawing skills continue to grow and not level off. If you do too much photomechanical tips and tricks, as I like to call them, your drawing skills will deteriorate, and that scares the crap out of me. I do not want drawing skills that are deteriorating, right? I'm going to say a corollary to that, or amplify it slightly. One of the things, especially when it comes to the hardest thing in the world, of course, which is the human face, one of the things that you will discover, as I have, is that if you try to draw, as I've just described, off the cuff, off the top of your head, just winging it, you will discover the mistakes that you often or typically make, and that's very helpful. For instance, and I thought about it right then because I was doing her ear, one of my perennial errors, if I can use that term, one of the mistakes I make is the distance between the corner of the eye and the ear. How far back, how wide is the temple? Now, I'm still not enough of an expert that I can nail it, but at least knowing that that's one of the places I often, sometimes, usually I make it the ear too close to the eye, but not always. So anyway, that just helps me, because that means when I get to that part of the face, I have to pay extra attention. There are other parts, like the distance, the filstrum, I think it is called, the distance between the bottom of your nose and the top of your top lip, that with a little indentation. Usually, I tend to get that right. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and measure right now. Just see how I'm doing in that exact measurement. Okay, close enough, I think. Let's do just a little bit more. Back to the double glasses. Her eye, this eye needs to be a little more squinty, a little more smiley. One of the mistakes to make when you're doing dark details on a face, by the way, is to make them too dark. Don't let your eye tell you that those, and of course the camera does not help you at all. Don't let your eye or the camera tell you that those dark areas are black. They are not black. In fact, they're probably not as dark as I've got them even right now. But I'm going to leave them just for now. I'll be coming back and painting them all again. All right. Now, I was debating, should I go ahead and do the same thing on Joe? And the answer is no. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay with Sara for a while. So I've cleaned up my nice high quality Winsor Newton Series 7 brush, so it's not drying on me. This whole side of her face, as you can see, I've got a great big black mark there that is not realistic at all. Don't worry, that'll get fixed. I'm going to do another test of a measurement, though. I want to see if her pupil over here is, if I've got it in the right place. Oops, glad I did that. No, that's what I was afraid of. It's somehow, in the course of my painting, her right eye, the eye that's on her left, has migrated downward. This is certainly what happens, by the way. This is what happens. So you do all the measuring, and then as you begin to paint, without you noticing, things morph and smoosh and move. So I've got her eye about, I don't know, it's hard to say, a 32nd of an inch too low, maybe, something like that. I'm looking for, mixing up a little dirty, smudgy, grayish flesh tone now to do her bottom eyelid. I'm glad I caught that. I would have caught it later in the process and would have had to come back and redo it. That would have been a bother. Doing it right now, it's a lot easier. So glad I caught that little error. Glad I was able to see it. That's the kind of thing that after you've worked on a face for a while, this applies to any kind of painting, but it especially applies to portrait painting. And I've never heard anybody else use the term, but I wish they would, because I think it's one of the key, for a flesh tone here, it's one of the key issues when you're doing portrait painting, and that is what I call portrait blindness. After staring at your painting for not very long, doesn't take long, after staring at it for just a little while, you become blind to all of your errors. You just don't see them anymore. It's a strange psychological thing. You're just so used to seeing it the way it is, you don't realize what is a mistake. This, by the way, is the reason. This is why friends can really help you with a portrait. Because when we experience this in our painters groups all the time. When someone else who has not been staring at your painting for a long time, when they look at your painting, it's kind of embarrassing sometimes because they see your mistakes instantly. And people who are not very experienced at portrait painting might feel a little smug at that point. But they shouldn't, because what they're experiencing is, again, the absence of portrait blindness. They have not been staring at it, so they see the mistakes easily. That's also part of the reason why a mirror is such a helpful tool for doing portraits, because when you turn your painting around to see a mirror image of it, much of your portrait blindness, as I call it, is alleviated, or disappears, because you're seeing it with fresh eyes. All right, that's much closer, except in the course of doing that little bit, her cheek got a little too wide. Rather than paint blue, I'm just going to see how much, if I could scrape some of that off with a sharp pencil. I can, but then I'm left with a dark. I think I'm going to go ahead and fix that right now. I'm left with a dark edge that is, of course, troublesome and not realistic. So I'm going to mix up. I already have some dirty blue here on my palette. Let me see if I can match that color fairly quickly. Oh yeah, good enough. All right, so I'm going to shave off that dark line that I just made along the edge, that it's been there the whole time. Get rid of that. I think we'll get a little bit more likeness when we do. All right, that, by the way, brings up a point, very worth saying. This applies to all painting, but it's paramount with portrait painting. There are many lines in all painting, representational painting, but especially portrait painting. There are many lines that are far too skinny to be painted with a paintbrush. All right, did you catch that? Many times. For instance, on a face, the creases in a face. How many of you ever seen somebody paint the cliche old Native American Indian man face, full of wrinkles, right? You've seen that kind of thing. Or likewise, the old Jew, you know, going back to a Eurocentric reference here. Well, if the painter knew what they were doing, let me start with the negative. If the painter didn't know what they were doing, and forgive me, if they're early in their journey, like we all are at some point, they will have gotten out a number 0 or double, triple. I don't have one of those, but you know, this used to be a number. That's really old. This is a number 1, but let's say number 4, and they'll put on 2 glasses, stick out their tongue, and go and paint a skinny line. Well, I'm delighted to break the news to you, because if it can make you a better painter, it's worth hearing this. You cannot, with any brush, you cannot paint a line skinny enough to render like creases in a face. And typically, the student, the early journey painter, you know, looks at their painter and says, "Oh, man, I did a damn good job." But at the same time, they go, "Yeah, but something's not quite right. The creases in that face, they just look too pronounced, and they can't figure out how to fix it." I'm going to tell you how to fix it. And this same thing applies. By the way, a classic example of this is when you're painting power lines, telephone wires in a landscape. Same thing. Now you can use a palette knife. That is legal. Now, not for the face creases. Palette knife won't work. Anyway, the secret is I'll start with telephone wires because they're easy. You take a fairly fat brush and go just paint the telephone wires fat. Then you take opaque blue, like imagine the sky is blue above and below the power line, and you mix up that color. There you go. And you still there? Oh, that's whew. And you paint over that dark mark. You skinny it up. You carve into it. You shave it up to just the right thickness. Which, by the way, if you want it to be a good painting, it should have a variation. It should not be. In some places, it should be probably completely disappear. That's how you do facial features as well. So a minute ago, I was getting rid of this dark outline on the edge of her face, and the way I did that was by shaving it up. In fact, virtually to 0. But that's a really, really helpful tip. If you've never, there'll be many places on both of these faces. There'll be faces on the, there'll be, I was being a smart aleck. There'll be places on the faces where I'll be carving into, shaving up lines to make them skinny enough, because it is impossible to get them skinny enough. And it's not just a matter of the width of the line, I don't think. It has to do with the fact that the line, that skinny line, is sitting on the topmost surface of your painting. That's why it doesn't look right. Because in reality, those creases or mini lines in the face they're indentations, right? No, this does not necessarily apply to eyelashes. They're indentations, and so they should look like it. So they should be actual indentations in your paint as well. So if you make the paint follow the topography of the actual face, you'll have a much more realistic and pleasing result. Now, I think I'm at a point now where I can abandon the super tight sable brush, and whenever possible, I want to go back to a bristle brush. Why? Because the bristle brush will create a more energetic stroke than the sable brush. The sable brush is almost made, you could say it's made so that brush strokes don't show up. That's an exaggeration, but you get the point. I'm going to try painting the edge of her nose with a bristle brush. I'm not sure that I can do it, but if I can, it'll be a more satisfactory, less razor sharp. Oh, by the way, when you do have to resort to using a super fine brush, like a Winsor Newton Series 7 sable brush, just because you have a brush in your hand that can render razor sharp lines does not mean that you must render razor sharp lines, right? So you can actually use the brush to smudge out some of those razor sharp lines. All right. And I am just about out of time today. Sorry to say, I expect to paint tomorrow. And then, as I said, that'll be it for a while. And I'm not nearly as far along as I would like to be. Before I go, though, I think her mouth has bothered me because her teeth aren't quite right. I'm going to do a little bit of work on her teeth, which, by the way, means I break into the blue paint on my palette here, right? Because I want a little bit of grayness on her teeth. So I already had a tan flesh color on my brushes, and so adding blue to it gives me a gray. I'm going to measure this. Hang on. How far her last tooth, essentially her last tooth. By the way, one of the mistakes you can make with teeth is to make them too sharp. It's a funny word when referencing teeth, right? To make them too hard-edged. So try not to do that, even though you know they are enamel. Okay, I'm going to move over 1/100 of an inch. And again, soften it slightly, just because I have a tool in my hand that allows me to render with extreme accuracy, precision. I don't want to leave. Okay, and then the last tooth to the right, not count the last one that has a significant amount of light on it. Yeah, I've got that one in the right place already. I'm going to brighten it just a tiny bit. You're not going to draw. You're not going to paint each tooth separately. That's another story. I won't have time to get into it right now. But part of what is keeping her mouth from her teeth from looking perfect at the moment is the distant, grayed out, almost invisible tooth on her left, our right. The left one. So I'm mixing up a duller, dimmer, darker. I don't know if you can see, but that, oh, I'm zoomed way out, sorry. But this little triangle here, this corner of her mouth is too dark. It's probably because this tooth is not seen. All right, much better. All right, while I've got this color on my brush, it's just about the perfect color for adding a tiny bit of white in her eye here. Tiny bit. And it's certainly not white. It's barely, it's a dull, dull gray. But it'll make a huge difference. How about this eye? Do we see any hint? No, but I'm going to add one. Anyway, I'm painting now from what I know, not from what I see. The camera does not do a good enough job to capture that detail. So at that point, I have to paint from knowledge. Okay, no. Oh, wait, I've got to fix this before I go. The crease under her right eye is far too dark. Woo! Some of you guys are waiting, saying, "You weren't going to see this. It's horrible." I know. I can only do one thing at a time. Hang on. Hold your horses. Are you ever mixing paint and your brush accidentally hits a pile of paint you did not intend it to? Yeah. All right. So this is hampering our likeness considerably because that crease is just way too dark. And it's going to take me a couple touches. So I just changed what was dark to not so dark, but now I have to paint above and below that mark that I just made. Soften it, lighten it. All right, there's nothing wrong with this painting that about 5 more hours of work won't fix. And it's, I hope, maybe 4 hours. I would like it if it was 4 instead of 5. Her mouth needs a lot of work now because I haven't given it much attention. Let me do just a tiny. I'm like a preacher that just says, one more point, just one more thing. Finally, in conclusion, right? I'm being just like that. All right, her mouth. I'm not going to finish her mouth at all. I'm just trying to get it closer. All right, as she stands right now, literally, I'm just on the way. That's all I can say. There's too much contrast going on in her face. The darks are too dark. The very thing I warned you against a little while ago. I did the same thing. Happens all the time. I'll come back and lighten up the darks and so forth. And then beyond that, there's just work. Nothing wrong, like I said, nothing wrong with this painting that 4 more hours of painting won't fix. And I'll let that be a lesson to you. I've said before, I get the impression, again, from hanging out with early journey artists, teaching them in my classes, and critiquing. Once a month I do an online / live critique, and then once a month I join this painters forum I was talking about earlier. And of course I see painters' works in galleries, and I judge shows sometimes. So anyway, I'm very much in touch with how not only like Oil Painters of America, the best artists in America, what they're doing that's better than what I do, but also people who are behind me on the journey. And I want to make a summary statement about portraits. I discover that most early journey portrait painters in particular underestimate the amount of work that it takes to render a good portrait. And I think part of that is sometimes we're not served so well by like the Joshua LaRocques, the Daniel Greens, you name it, the big dog. Josh is a young guy, Daniel Green's an old guy. They just do it, do the whole thing, and it's beautiful in an hour and a half. Well, yeah, good for them. That's all they do every day, and they've done it for years, and so on and so on and so on, and they have immense skill. Yeah, most of us don't do that. And even they don't do that, to tell you the truth. I saw one of Daniel Green's paintings one time, and I went, it's got some mistakes in it. And I was right, because he had portrait blindness with that painting, and I didn't. So it was easy for me to see. I'm not saying I'm a better artist by any means. But the amount of work. In fact, having said that, some of you discovered me from my one viral video, which is pen and ink, and so many comments like, oh, that's way too much work. I would never do that much work. I go, yeah, I know you wouldn't. That's how come I get paid and you don't. That's why I'm good and you're not. Because tedium is one of my favorite words. Most human achievement is accomplished through the enduring of tedium. Oh, tedium. Musical instruments. I practice every day, pretty much. I'm a musician. Most of you haven't ever heard me. Probably changed this year. I have a whole bunch of people in the world that admire my musicianship and don't even know I'm an artist. So there you go. Last night there was one passage on a trumpet. I play 10 instruments basically. Trumpet is my main one. And there's this one part of one scale that I've been having a hard time with for months. I mean, my whole life. And just last night, I was in a bedroom with the door closed, so I don't drive my wife too crazy. But I played the same 6 notes up and down, da 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 da, probably 300 or 400 times for 20 minutes, maybe 1,000 times. I don't know, for 20 minutes. I was just playing da 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 da, the same thing over, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, and so on and so forth. Tedium, 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 tedium. Why am I as good as I am at trumpet? Tedium. Why am I as good at portraiture? Part of the reason is tedium. Willing to take the time to do the work that needs to be done. So there you go, just a word of discouragement for you. No, a word of encouragement. Takes time, work at it. All right, got a bunch of people left chats here. Let me look at them before I go. Michael, I'm sticking my tongue out like crazy. Forgive me. Oh, Tiago, bless you. One of those Series 7 costs more than you make in a week. Send me your address. Let me send you a brush, my friend. I'm serious. Send me a text. I'll send you some brushes. Shandy Pop, hello. Thank you for your encouragement. Tiago asks a very good question. Could this portrait have been done in acrylics alone? The answer is yes, but with much more difficulty. Much more difficult. It can be done. There are people who do extreme realism in acrylics. It's good for them. It's just more difficult. You don't have working time. Now you can't add stuff to your acrylics, not water. You can add a slowing agent that makes them act more like acrylic, more like oils, but it can be done. More difficult, that's all. Yep. I remind you of one of your art teachers. That's good, probably. Joe's mom says his head needs to be more bucket-shaped. Well, I will certainly... Oh, yeah, I see what she means. That's a good description. Yes, got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. I would have called it anyway, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. This line out here needs to go out that way. Good feedback. That's hilarious. All right, so well, I'm glad you found it helpful, Shani. That's very good. I don't think I've ever seen your name before. Thank you for joining us. We tend to have a small but enthusiastic, I tend to have a small but enthusiastic community who follow me, and I'm just not willing to work to make it the community any bigger. So I do what I do, and I'm having fun. Leave me alone. And thank you for joining me. I appreciate